And we are live. So, welcome to episode 118 of An American Werewolf in New Jersey. I am the American Werewolf. In the house tonight, we've got a first-time visitor and guest. We've got the Cadaver Club in here, and thanks for coming on to the show and hanging out a little bit and donating some of your time.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. I've had fun hanging out with you and discussing movies on the IFC stuff. So glad to do it.
Yeah, we connected on the on Patrick's channel, and so to have an opportunity to to do our own little thing here, and I think we were looking over some films, and we narrowed it down to this, and this is as good a film as any to sit down and shoot the shit about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hold on a second. We got a comment. Oh, Eric. Eric is here. He says, "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the show, Ben." And we've got. Okay. So you're handling all that yourself. Okay. Watched this movie for the first time last night. Holy shit. Yeah. I have one of those friends who, no matter what you've seen, she's seen it 6 months before you somehow. Everybody's got one of those people in their life. And she started talking to me about this movie, Bone Tomahawk. And this movie came out at the same time that the Hateful Eight did. So I was in another part of the world at that time, didn't have access to Bone Tomahawk, but the major theaters over there were playing, Quentin Tarantino and the blockbusters. So I could catch the Marvel films or, whatever horrible movie The Rock was doing or whatever. So I caught the Hateful Eight, and it was pretty good. It had a clever script. It was a pretty decent story. I thought Walton Goggins stole every scene, which he always does because he's Walton fucking Goggins. But later on, I had access to this movie, and it's completely different than the Hateful Eight. I think the Hateful Eight steals all the smoke. And so this is a smaller sort of cult thing. But what I find now, especially about 18 months into doing this show, is that the smaller things a lot of times are better. The big blockbusters drown everything out, and that gets all the, the oxygen in the room, and, that's fine. But for me, a little bit older, I'm falling back on the smaller things, and this certainly qualifies as that.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard, I think I heard about this on YouTube, I heard some horror people talking about it. So I watched it, it was pretty quickly after it came out. I've probably seen it like 4 times now, I think.
Did you see it in the theater?
I did not see it in the theater.
Okay.
I saw it, first on Blu-ray. I might have even pirated it, to be honest with you, the first time.
I wasn't going to get into that, but overseas, that's how I ended up getting access to it, and I was very grateful, to be able to do that. And it was, it was fucking phenomenal. Horror Westerns, by definition, usually they're very rare, and they're usually fucking catastrophes. Go ahead, you were gonna.
I was just gonna say I love the mashing up of genres like that, and I can only think of a few. And like I've liked them. So like Burrowers, I don't know if you've seen that one, but that was
I didn't see it.
Another IFC midnight one we did was called The Wind, which sort of takes place in that.
Yeah, I did see that. That was a weird one.
It was weird.
It was a weird one. I wasn't really sure that I liked it. I didn't dislike it. Yeah. But I wasn't crazy about it either. I usually give IFC films a check out. I think by and large they tend to grab onto some respectable content. So I'll usually give it a chance. I wasn't crazy about it. I still haven't seen that movie, The Lodge, and a couple of other things that I seem to be in a similar vein.
I love The Lodge, by the way.
Okay, I haven't gotten around to it. I've heard good things. It's like on this list of 4 movies. This guy listed like 15 movies that he termed elevated horror. I hate that term, but most of the movies that were on there I really fucking liked, and I think I've got 3 or 4 left, and that's one of them. And
The Lodge, we were talking a little bit before we got on about pacing in modern audiences and whatnot, and The Lodge is a very slow burn, but it's really atmospheric, and I liked it quite a bit. But I do know some people that it's just too slow for them.
Yeah, and I get that. It's not, these types of films aren't for everyone. And in today's fast-paced everything, where faster is better, and in many, in many walks of life, deservedly, people need things more quickly than whatever. But yeah, for these types of films, increasingly, I'm finding that sometimes less is more. So there you go. So if you're ready, I guess we can start talking about Bone Tomahawk. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, man. Let's jump right into it.
All right, boogie woogie. So there's no shortage of Western movies that involve rescue attempts. And I'm thinking going all the way back to like John Ford and with Wayne and the Searchers. And, if the Duke was good for anything, it was playing the Duke. And he was never more the Duke than in this movie, which is based on a real life story, or loosely based on, of Cynthia Parker, who was the mother of Quanah Parker, the final great Comanche chief, who was an American woman or a Dutch woman, I think, who was kidnapped by Comanches. And she actually integrated into, it was like Dances with Wolves, like a real life Dances with Wolves. She actually integrated into the Comanche society and became a mother and gave birth to Quanah. And actually, it's very sad because she was retaken many years later. And was not able, she was separated from her son and her husband and all these different things. And she was never able to get back to the Comanche way of life. And she ended up, I think, dying quite sadly. It was a very tragic set of circumstances. You have movies like The Missing that I like a great deal with Cate Blanchett and Tommy Lee Jones about these girls that are kidnapped and, need to be rescued. But this sort of falls into a different vein in that it really is. It starts out as a rescue mission, but then it turns into, like, with 40 minutes left. It's not like some 5-minute, quick horror scene. You've got a good 45 minutes in that second half that turn into a full-scale horror movie.
Yeah,
and it works.
I thought so. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, this book is based on a book that I read, actually, called Wraiths of the Broken Land by S. Craig Zahler. And the book is actually a little more brutal, but it's different than the movie. And I saw some of the behind the scenes and Zahler speaking about it, and that the screenplay went through many incarnations. In the book, it's like a band of retired killers that just, they're doing other shit now. And the one guy, his daughters get kidnapped right around the same time period and are sort of forced into this hellish Mexican brothel. And so he has to bring all of his old compatriots back to go into Mexico and pull those girls out of there again. And if you ever get a chance to read the book, Wraiths of the Broken Land, it's absolutely worthwhile. Keep a cheap copy on Amazon. It'll take you like a day to read. It's one of those, but it's fantastic. S. Craig Zahler writes some crazy shit, and he wrote this screenplay and directed it. And yeah, it fucking shows.
So in the book, are there troglodytes, or is it just the brothel?
It's just it's a brothel, but it is like a sort of fortified brothel with like some genuine. It's like a small army of genuinely evil people like running that thing, because you could only run something like that by force.
Sure.
So he brings a small band of his old compatriots, and I think his son, coming to rescue his sisters, and they come and grab, the two girls out, and then have to fight their way out all the way back home again. And they like lie to this one guy who's like a Spanish teacher, because none of them speak Spanish. So they lie to this guy who's like a Spanish teacher, this American guy, and they like trick him into going down there with him, not, knowing that it's probably a suicide run, but that's what they need. And it's a fantastic book. You would enjoy it a lot. Hold on a second. We got some more comments here. Mr. Dan is in the house. What's up, Dan? Saying what's up, and you're already saying hi to everybody. So Kurt Russell is my favorite actor, and as always, he was damn good in this. Yeah, great cast all around. You agreeing Kurt Russell is always good. This is a 5-star ensemble cast. This movie was shot in 21 days. I mean, they just went for it and just went right to the wall with this story. Who have we got here? We've got Kurt Russell as the sheriff, Franklin Hunt. We've got Richard Jenkins. Oh, I always love Richard Jenkins as the backup deputy, Chicory. And he's just great in this because he adds a little bit of comic relief, because otherwise the movie is so fucking relentlessly bleak. It would be quite a slog. You've got Patrick Wilson. I like Patrick Wilson as the injured cowboy, Arthur O'Dwyer. You've got Samantha Dwyer, and she's played by Lily Simmons. And I'm a fan of Lily Simmons. Going back to the days of the best show that no one ever watched on Cinemax called Banshee, which is just, if you get a chance to ever see Banshee, it's fucking fantastic. And it's a story of this guy who assumes the identity of this dead cop on his way to accepting the new sheriff's position in this little small Pennsylvania Dutch town of Banshee. And it is just like one of the most hardcore shows I've ever seen. And you've got a couple of Banshee alumni in this. And then you've got Mr. Bruder, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. His real name as the gentleman.
Michael Fox?
Something Fox. Something along those lines. But what really grabbed me from the get-go was the appearance of the great Sid Haig, the late great Sid Haig, and David Arquette, who are the last two people that you would think to pair together.
But both, I would say, probably horror royalty, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. I'm not a fan of the Scream movies, but clearly, David Arquette has cut his bones, cut his chops in that. And he was also in one of my favorite horror movies, Ravenous, with Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle.
Yep.
And they are just a bunch of bloodthirsty killers. It starts out where they're just killing everybody. They're just killing people in their sleep and stealing from them. I mean, it starts out with a really graphic scene of David Arquette, of all people, just graphically and gruesomely cutting someone's throat.
Yeah, like the very first shot, right?
Yeah, the very first shot is David Arquette, of all people, because I always consider him to be like a fucking goofball. Yeah. So it's like really, for me, against type, to see him just, slicing someone's throat and the sounds that you could hear as he's cutting through all the muscles and the arteries and everything like that. You're like, what the fuck? Like Sid Haig, I could see him doing that.
Sure.
David Arquette, not so much.
It was like Sid Haig was his mentor too, because he's like, you didn't cut deep enough. There's this many veins and you got to cut all a single one of them. He's like, oh, there's a lot of blood.
This idea, and I've always had this idea. We talked about a little bit when we covered Eggers the Witch, of how brutal frontier life must have been.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, you just go. There's no assumption of security anywhere, really. You're just out there on your own. Obviously everybody's packing a gun, and you just take your chances. Even laying there in an open field or something like that can get your throat cut. which probably isn't that far from the truth.
Yeah.
There were probably lots of people that were just waylaying other people that they could and just taking whatever they had. Those people really had nothing. They had some books, and a little bit of money. But it starts off that way, and before you know it, I guess their friends are coming back, and they end up running into the troglodyte burial ground.
Yeah.
Which is never a good sign. And Sid Haig, I guess we're seeing here. I think this wasn't too long before he passed. I don't know if this was his last role, but it might have been. And he doesn't last long in the movie at all. Maybe the first 5 or 7 minutes, and then he gets the axe.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those arguments where there's always a bigger fish. Arquette and Haig are cut one guy's throat, but then,
Sure.
They get chopped, they get thrown into the meat grinder really fast too. And so that brings us to the town of Bright Hope. And I love the name of the town.
I know, right?
I mean, it sort of beams optimism. Everybody seems like a decent person in the town. Hardworking. They're not. I mean, that's there's a little bit of exposition set up there. You've got the sheriff, Kurt Russell, and what I liked about this is that nobody's a Superman.
Right.
It's just they're just strong people. They're kind of hard asses, but no one stands out. Kurt Russell's not like to the nth degree with anything. Right. So everybody kind of meets on an even playing field. But at the same time, everybody respects that Kurt Russell is the sheriff. And before long, the character played by oh God, what's his name? What's his name? What's the name of David Arquette's character? Starts with a P.
I'm terrible with names.
Yeah. Well, you get a little bit of.
He told them that his name was Buddy.
Yeah, he tells them, but his name. Well, he ends up rolling into Bright Hope and automatically sticks out like a sore thumb.
Sure. Yeah.
And you've got the dynamic between a competent sheriff, but then like Richard Jenkins, he's such a great character actor. Richard Jenkins is such a great character actor that he's kind of like a loyal dog.
Yeah, 100%.
He's not smart, but he's reasonably competent. It kind of is like having a police dog or something like that. So he decides not to take on David Arquette, even though he sees this stranger in their town where clearly everybody knows everybody, burying, something underground. And he goes and tells Kurt Russell. They go to meet in the bar, and, clearly before long, that conversation really doesn't go well. I like the dialogue. In the story. Zaller wrote some really good back and forth. He set up the exposition really well without overdoing it.
Yeah. And even before they make it to the bar, we're introduced to Matthew Fox's character, right?
Well, he's in the bar.
But I mean, before Kurt Russell comes, you sort of get introduced to his character because he's already there when they arrive.
Yeah, Mr. Bruder. He's just hanging. He's like the lady. He's not the ladies' man exactly, but he's the single guy of the bunch.
Yeah. And
he's just in the bar hanging out, and he's gonna have a drink before whatever. And you get a little bit of humor with him and the piano player. These sorts of things. It's a predominantly male cast also. So you get a lot of that back and forth sort of, insulting, thing going on back and forth, where everybody's, just kind of poking at everybody, you kind of got to have a thick skin, which I thought was, was pretty accurate. If you were to throw just a bunch of guys in together, everybody just starts busting everybody's balls.
Yeah.
So, I think he got that part right. Hold on a second. We got some, let's see, Matthew Fox. Okay. Sid did his cameo in 3 from Hell after this. Okay, yeah. All right, so maybe 3 from Hell. Was it Purvis? I don't think
that's what Eric's saying.
Okay. He stole the name Buddy from Haig. Okay, what a bastard. Okay. Yeah, it might have been Purvis. That's a little on the nose, but okay. But it doesn't take too long to figure out that, Kurt Russell's not fucking around in the town. For some reason, he decides to make a run for it. They have this confrontation, and before you know it, he just ends up shooting David Arquette in the leg, and it's quick and it's no nonsense. And, before you know it, David Arquette's on his way to jail. I mean, what did you think of Kurt's character?
Well, yeah, I mean, he definitely is like the strong, silent, badass type. And yeah, very no nonsense, because he hasn't even done anything wrong. He buried some guns, right, and like his shit, and I believe they dug it up before they got in there. So like he knows that he has guns and stuff, but I mean, he didn't commit any crime, and Kurt Russell just straight up like shoots his leg as he's trying to get away, and then he's like, after they bring what's her face in to remove the bullet. Yeah, he says he'll probably still hang, but it'll be good, if he can like make it long enough for people to see his face turn purple on the rope or whatever the fuck he says.
Yeah. And Lily Simmons, she ends up having to come in to fix up his leg. Now, let me say something, because I didn't get a chance to say this to you before we went on. Jump in wherever you want to.
Sure.
Like, don't wait for me to cue. Just jump in whatever you want to say. It's just kind of a free-flowing conversation. I'm sorry. I should have explained that to you before we got on.
Oh, no, it's good. It's all good.
Okay. So now the Samantha Dwyer, played by Lily Simmons, was originally, it was supposed to be Jennifer Carpenter.
Really?
Yeah, from The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Yeah, and
I think that would have worked.
She would have been pretty good.
Yeah, I like her acting a lot. I mean, obviously, she's cut her bones in horror between, Emily Rose and Dexter, and then the Quarantine movie, which was the remake of Wreck.
Yeah, did you see Brawl in Cell Block 99, by the way, by the same filmmaker that did Bone Tomahawk?
No, what's it called?
Brawl in Cell Block 99.
I've heard about it. I haven't been able to. Really?
It's amazing. Yeah, it's good. You'll love it. But she's also in that one. So
Lily Simmons or Jennifer Carpenter?
Carpenter.
Okay. So Jennifer Carpenter would have worked out, but I like Lily Simmons. Banshee was a hardcore thing, and so I had no problem with her at all. The way that this is set up is that these are not modern men.
Right.
So they're not over, like, there's not an over reliance on like clever dialogue the way that like Hateful Eight got into. Yeah. Everything is short, everything is truncated. Like Patrick Wilson, he doesn't want to read that thing to his wife. He doesn't want to read that poem. She's very sweet. She's taking good care of him. He's got some sort of compound fracture. He fell off a roof on his leg. But none of these guys are overly emotive. They're not overly talkative. They're just kind of straight to the point, kind of action-y kind of thing. And that sparse sort of dialogue works, because if you're setting up a movie like this, people that talk too much probably wouldn't have come across the same way. Zoller got that.
I would say like the two most verbose were Bruder, was that Matthew Fox's character's name?
Yeah.
Bruder and Chicory, right?
Yeah. And usually it was their banter back and forth arguing with each other.
And Chicory even says, you know, like, what would you rather just hear us breathe? You know, it's way better, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, look, because Bruder doesn't even want to hear that.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you ever stop talking? You know, and you know, it's just that kind of. I mean, you could put like 4 guys in a room, and probably nobody. Under certain circumstances, you know, you'd get like 1 word every, you know, 5 minutes or something like that. You know, depending on the guys, that sort of thing. So you know, I could see that. She just gets. I mean, there's no overemphasis on the. And I like that they did this. They held the action to the end, because when Lily and the Ben character and I guess Purvis end up getting grabbed, you never really see it.
Right.
You know, and so I mean, in other movies, it probably would have been a long, drawn out thing. You know, you would have gotten a look at whoever the villain is. Here, you see very little of anything, and that kind of makes it worse.
It's more like the Jaws / Alien approach, right? Where you don't like blow your load all in the first act or whatever.
Right, but I mean, especially if you don't know what you're supposed to be expecting.
Yeah,
you know, because you're thinking like Native Americans or something like that. You know, that kind of works in The Searchers, the way they do it. You know, you just see this shadow come up and grab Natalie Wood. You never really see the girls get grabbed in that other movie, The Missing, this kind of thing. But especially in a horror Western, which, you know, at the time I didn't understand was clearly defined as a horror Western. I just thought it was like a Western.
Right.
You know,
I you know, watching it again, like, yeah, it is. I don't know. It's an interesting discussion what constitutes horror, right? Like, what defines the genre? Because I always consider it a horror movie, but if you think about it, it's kind of a creature feature in a sense, but not. You know,
kind of. It's not a supernatural kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm at the place where the things that like scare me the most are when I see things that people do to each other in movies, or obviously in real life. I'm not so much, you know, vampires and werewolves. You know, they kind of don't do that for me anymore. But if I'll watch a movie like this, or a movie like Zodiac, you know, every once in a while you'll get a real upper level movie, and you're like, holy shit, that was scary. You know, that kind of thing. But here, I would consider this a horror movie.
Yeah,
I mean, you're overtly dealing with, you know, kidnapping and cannibalism, and you know, you've got a little bit of, you know, body horror going on in there as well.
Let's just call it elevated horror. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's not. Okay, yeah, let's not. Please, my favorite elevate. Jesus Christ.
I thought. Now, did you think that the troglodytes had tracked Purvis to that town, and that's why that all happened, because he had like
that is my assumption. I mean, because it's a 5-day travel,
right?
You know, nobody goes out exploring for 5 days, you know, unnecessarily, you know, in that sort of way. Yeah, I mean, he desecrated, and you know, it was just ironic, you know, that Buddy and Purvis had killed those people, but you know, no matter how bad they are, they're not as bad as Indians.
Yeah,
you know, and like Sid Haig's dialogue is, you know, I'm a civilized man. You know, it's just like the irony of it is just fantastic. But I mean, it really does start to set the suspense when you find out that, you know, even among Indians, you know, this is a whole separate thing.
Now, I was surprised to find out that people considered this movie racist. I watched a YouTube video, and a guy said like, what was the title of it? It was like Bone Tomahawk is I don't even remember, but his sort of like whole thing was like it's just racist against Native Americans, which I didn't think at all. I mean, because they totally made the distinction. Their physiology is fucking different, you know, and like So I didn't feel that. I was surprised. I mean,
No, but I mean, I think you have people that are just like by definition, looking for fights to pick.
yeah.
So these
But
people are
what a
just
weird one to pick, though. I mean, it's like
they'll find it in anything. I have this great meme where it's just like no matter what, the same person finds something racist. It's like if a black guy's pulling a gun on a white guy, that's racist. If it's a white guy pulling a gun on a black guy, that's racist.
right.
And it's like 6 different scenarios, but no matter what, it's racist. So screw those people.
I thought it was interesting though. I never really thought of it like that. I mean, it'd be like calling the dissent racist, right? Or something that.
Yeah, it's not supposed to make any sense. The point is, to me at least, you're just going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So if they, it's like Chinese finger cuffs. The more you argue, the more you get tied up. Breakdown with Kurt Russell is terrifying because it's plausible. That was the version of Falling Down that he did, wasn't it?
No, that was the one where his wife got kidnapped, and he's on the quest to try to recover her.
Okay.
And he comes in contact with some dudes.
Real life things like this are much more scary. Home invasion movies, yeah. What's the Mike Flanagan movie with the home invasion? That is scary as hell. I think the doctor mentioned in their cells that's exactly why the troglodytes attacked Purvis, desecrated the burial ground by knocking over the skulls. There's a Native American professor in this. Yeah, don't think it's racist, but that has nothing to do with anything. I like that. The way that this thing is handled. He goes over to tell Patrick Wilson, your wife's been kidnapped. We're meeting over at the tavern to figure out what can be done.
Yeah.
It's not all gung ho, And what I thought of this happening was, this must be, for a law enforcement officer, like their worst nightmare, like some sort of sheriff.
Yeah.
And I remembered A History of Violence, Cronenberg's movie.
Yeah.
With Vigo. There's a scene in there where the small town sheriff ends up pulling over Ed Harris as they're driving like their Lincoln Town car on the outskirts of town. And to realize that like real life big city organized crime has come to his small town.
Yeah.
That must be like a law enforcement officer's like worst nightmare. And he ends up having this conversation with Vigo and Maria Bello at the time, telling them who these people are. Although, we find out later that Vigo knows everything. It must have been, it was a very similar thing that I thought of, that something like this would happen because these people aren't equipped for this.
Right.
There's no sheriff or, there's no huge, big town or anything like that. There's no posse to put together. They put together these 4 guys that aren't compatible. These people aren't designed to work together because the ironic thing about this is that every man is not used to taking orders from someone else. The person that might be the most congenial is Chicory, and he's only used to working with Kurt Russell. And so you've got Patrick Wilson with a compound fracture in his leg trying to ride. You've got, what's his name again? Bruder.
Yeah.
And so, it's just kind of 4 guys that throw themselves together to go on this ride. And then from there, it just kind of descends into what, even I figured out, like at the first time I saw this, that this was probably a suicide run.
Well, I don't think that they all went thinking that they were going to not come back. You know what I mean? I think there was a point where it became sort of that, right? But like, I think initially they thought, yeah, we're going to go, we're going to like retrieve these, people that got kidnapped. But that's just like their spirit. You have to have that like go get them attitude. That's like their whole thing. So,
I figured that these people. My impression was that from the get go this wasn't going to end well. You had Patrick Wilson with a bad leg. I figured everyone was going to die. To be perfectly honest, Patrick Wilson with a bad leg. Richard Jenkins can barely walk. Kurt Russell is not Kurt Russell from like 1980. So Kurt Russell is probably 70 something at this age. And then you've got Bruder. So I didn't know who was going to make it. I didn't think many. Right. And they're just kind of this ragtag group that goes out together. And the fact that you weren't exactly sure who they were up against, except that, on the outskirts of town, you could hear that howling coming from the throat whistle.
Yeah.
Told me that these guys were outmatched.
And there's the exposition in the bar with the Native American professor, right? Where he sort of breaks down, oh, these are not men, these are troglodytes. You know?
Yeah, and he tells them, nobody that goes out there is coming back.
Yeah.
You're going into their territory. You're going to try to ride 5 days in 3.
Right.
One of you has a broken leg. 2 of you are old. Kurt Russell's a strong guy, but, it's not. If they wanted, they could have casted somebody else like Jason Statham or something like that. If it was going to be that kind of a movie, you know what I mean? I didn't figure it was going to end well for anybody.
Has a happier ending than you would think.
Yeah, it's better than I would have expected. The people that make it, surprised me.
Yeah,
it surprised me. But this is where Richard Jenkins is just so great. In that he plays such a buffoon. And he has a loyal dog. He's like a hound dog, but he's a buffoon. Because like Bruder's like, are any of you somnambulists? And Richard Jenkins, that's private. He's like, that means you're a sleepwalker. Oh, no. So, that kind of helps break up the tension, but these guys really don't get along and they don't trust each other. It's like I said, it's not exactly a character, story or anything like that, but you get enough.
Well, and there's also tensions between Patrick Wilson and Bruder, O'Dwyer and Bruder, because at one point, Bruder had like designs on his wife, and he still sort of like teases him about it or whatever, right? But so there's already tension there, and everyone's already tense with Bruder because they're like,
Not to mention, and it goes without saying, but it's never said, they're all afraid. Like, they're going to do something like super, super dangerous, where they've been told they're not coming back alive. But it's one of those movies where, like, everybody's like an old school kind of man. Like, no one's going to say, I'm afraid.
Sure.
Like in a more modern movie, somebody would say, you're afraid. Someone would accuse him of that. And then the response would be, hell yeah, I'm afraid. I'm terrified, but, I'm going out there anyway. Here, nobody's going to say something like that, but it's going to make short tempers. If people were saying, yeah, I'm afraid, then maybe, you wouldn't have the harsh dynamics that you kind of do. But because everybody keeps that, their fear to themselves.
I think that's like that prairie life, right? You have to be a person who's just going to act, in order to survive, or they would have already been dead.
Yeah. And what you find out very quickly is that Bruder is a killer.
He's a fucking serial killer, dude, and a fucking brutal racist.
Yeah. It's not necessarily without cause, and I think that was part of the life back then too.
Yeah.
Which we start to get into, but he's very strong, in his opinions on things. I'm the smartest person here, so I'm going to keep everybody alive. Richard Jenkins is like, how the hell do you figure that? And he's like, well, smart men don't get married. Right. Like nobody knows what to say to that, But yeah, he's a straight up killer. And so I think what ends up happening is that they're finding out about each other on this trip. Like they don't know that about Bruder necessarily. He's just the guy, he's Mr. Bruder in the town, and he sort of makes, off-color comments maybe every once in a while about O'Dwyer's wife or something like that. But once they get out into the field, man, he just starts letting the bullets fly. He's not fucking around.
Well, he's sort of, I think in his mind, he's like the alpha, right? He's the guy who's smartest, and he's the guy who's like the most badass. So he should be the one calling the shots or whatever. And I think like Kurt Russell is sort of like, yeah, but I'm the law. So you have that tension. And O'Dwyer's just really not thinking about anything but his wife and his leg. He's just like rushing into the abyss. He doesn't really give a fuck, you know?
I got the impression that almost everybody in this group is an alpha. Like O'Dwyer's like a foreman, you know, in his particular domain. So he's not used to having anybody tell him what to do. You know, the sheriff, obviously, Kurt Russell, he's not used to having anybody tell him what to do. Bruder, you know, he's not used to it. So, you know, you've got 3 alpha males.
Yeah.
And, you know, like nobody's getting along. Not really. I mean, this isn't a thing where like people eventually become friends.
Right.
You know, they just keep going at it. And it starts getting worse and worse. Like when Bruder shoots the dog. You know, and you're like, what the fuck? You know, it just startles everybody like out of their sleep because nobody expected somebody to just start firing right off. But that's what Bruder does. And then they have to go to sleep hearing that dog cry until it dies. You know, and that's just that really, you know, ratchets up the tone of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just like him again being like that man of action, right? Like you hear that tripwire go, you shoot. Don't think about it.
Yeah.
Somehow he fucking like did a sit up and like shot immediately and hit the fucking whatever had tripped it, right? I mean, a coyote or wolf or dog or whatever, but
yeah, he's a stone killer, man. He's just a stone killer. And, you know, I mean, you know, hey, I'm going out on this trip with this guy from town. And you find out once you get on the road with him that he's a stone fucking killer. You know, that's like disconcerting to some people. You know, and then you've got the problem of O'Dwyer's leg.
Yeah.
And that just, man, like it starts off where, you know, he's taking that boot off. And like, have you ever broken your leg?
I've not broken my leg, but I've taken a boot off.
Okay. Well, I broke my leg.
Yeah.
I broke my leg like almost exactly the way that he did. And that clearly looks like a compound fracture, which is what I had. That is just unimaginable, having to wear boots. I mean, because, you know, people just don't wear boots anymore. But, you know, not as an everyday thing. But, I mean, you know, he's hobbled. He doesn't want to admit how much pain he's in. It just gets more and more brutal. You know, it just descends further, shooting the dog, his leg, the arguments with Kurt Russell back and forth as to whether or not, you know, he's taken the opium.
Yeah.
And then they go through his shit.
He's clearly fucked from the get-go. I mean, he should not have made that trip no matter what, but he wouldn't be dissuaded because he's like that frontiersman who's like my wife, you know?
Yeah. You wouldn't be able to dissuade somebody from going out after their wife. I mean, how would you really stop him?
Yeah, and you can't even really like argue with them. Yeah, okay, that's your fucking loved one. Like, yeah, you need to go. I get it.
Yeah. Hold on a second. We've got Eric here. Hush.
Yeah.
Was the name of the Flanagan. Yeah, that's a fantastic home invasion movie. And that's more horrible than, like, I love Mike Flanagan and, you know, Midnight Mass and all this stuff. But this was, much worse. Much worse. That scene where they decide if they need to amputate his leg or reset the bone. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough.
Well, they want to amputate.
Huh?
I mean, amputation, that's like back then, that was like the major surgery anyone did, like, you know, because otherwise that's just going to get gangrenous and just like.
He's going to die.
Yeah, you're going to die. So, like.
He's going to die.
Like all the Civil War is just like, oh, you injured your leg, we're cutting that bitch off, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine somebody sawing your fucking leg off while you just have to lay there and, you know, have people hold you down and all this kind of stuff. But, I mean, before we get to that, Bruder shoots those 2 Mexicans.
Right.
I mean, he just dead-eye shoots them. You know, they're talking and Kurt Russell's come forward. Did you trust them?
And
did you attach
I didn't not
The
trust
person,
them.
yeah,
I didn't have enough information at that point, but I didn't think that they were going to get shot right off the bat. I thought, they would come in and then there'd be a little more development, and you would see if you trust them or not. But they didn't get the chance because Bruder's like, hey man, you
yeah,
know,
not today.
either they're scouts or they didn't announce themselves properly. So either way, fuck them.
Yeah, either they're thieves or they're, scouts for a raiding party.
Right.
That kind of thing. He's not exactly in the wrong for thinking that way.
No, and it turns out he was right.
Yeah, it turns out he was absolutely right. Yeah, I was going to say that because, I mean, you did make the connection between the third guy who comes in later on and almost kills Bruder.
Yeah.
And those two Mexican guys. And that one scene from Richard Jenkins, he goes, Mr. Bruder just educated two Mexicans on the meaning of manifest destiny.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, that's harsh. This is my land now, motherfucker. Bang.
Manifest destiny that's kind of problematic in general, just conceptually.
Well, not back then it wasn't, because everybody just shot your ass. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was what manifest destiny is, the idea that God has, intended for this to pass, and we are now the stewards of this land and we're taking it over, and tough fucking luck, otherwise, which is kind of how it went down.
Yeah.
It just, they moved from east to west and, steamrolled just about everything. And so this takes place probably the late 19th century?
It was after when Chicory goes to visit his wife. The date was 1891, so it was after that.
Yeah, because he was a soldier in the Civil War, they're saying, and he had performed some amputations. Yeah. The one black kid, what was his name? I can't remember. Buford in the stable. Yeah. He ends up getting killed. So this was post Civil War kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, Buford's just shooting people left and right. And so nobody's really in charge. That's the thing. Like, you're used to seeing, and that's what I like about this movie. You're used to seeing Kurt Russell being in charge.
Right.
But the best he can do is just kind of manage so that it doesn't completely implode.
Right. Because what are you going to do? I mean, they're shot. They're already shot.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you need everybody.
Yeah.
Because this isn't even the real fight. These are just things that are happening along the way. That's what I love about this story.
And they have that little standoff, right? So you're like, you don't know how it's going to go down, but there's that tension, hey man, but they all realize, look, what are you going to do? We can't eliminate half our fucking team and still, go do this. So
yeah, they have to choke it down, and he's not exactly wrong, but it's not the nice thing to do.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the Christian thing to do, and it's obviously nothing that anybody else in the party approves of.
Also not necessarily the way to do it, right? Because I think he wanted to get information from, that's what Kurt Russell was saying, well, even if they were, I still wanted to get information about them. Maybe we could track down their party or whatever, know what to expect.
I got the impression that Bruder, although he was a killer, he's a stone killer, was right in this sense over Kurt Russell. I don't think they would have, it's too risky. There's a third man out there, somewhere that wants to kill you.
I think it was more than one too, because he stole 3 horses.
Yeah, that's right. The horses are gone. And then instantly it flips and humanizes Bruder for a minute because he has to shoot his horse.
Yeah. It's interesting because he's, obviously if you just took his character and presented his character to someone, he's like a racist sociopath, mass murderer, serial killer, right? But but he's not a sociopath because he does have a connection with his horse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when you understand, when you get towards the end, which we'll get to in a little bit, he has a rationale for why he feels that way. Although, you could argue that, it's not everybody's fault, but when he starts to talk about his mother and his sisters.
Well, he has a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
That sent him down the road of being a serial killer. But
everybody was killing everybody back then.
Yeah.
So everybody
But I mean, his count was pretty fucking high.
Yeah, you get the impression that he's like a veteran of the Indian Wars.
Yeah.
All those wars that happened back then. And it was the same way with John Wayne when he comes back home at the beginning of The Searchers, he comes back from the Indian Wars and he's just a blatant racist.
Yeah.
He wants to save Natalie. He finds the guy that's going along with John Wayne to rescue Natalie Wood figures out that he's out there now to kill her because it's better if she's converted to kill her than to actually leave her be and have her turn into a native. So it's probably a predominant attitude of the time. But again, he's necessary to the team.
But it's also, I got the feeling that he made it his mission to eliminate as many Native Americans as possible.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's not a nice man.
Right. Yeah.
He's not a nice man or anything like that. I mean, he has absolutely no qualms about anything. And that's probably one of the, the big divides between him and Chicory and, him and the sheriff. At this point, though, they lose the horses and then Patrick Wilson has to start walking.
Yeah.
Oh, and you can just hear every once in a while that bone grind.
Yeah.
And you're just like, fuck, man. I mean, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. It really is like some sort of walk through hell.
And he's getting less sleep than everyone else too, because he leaves first and they surpass him and go past him, and then he catches up as they're already like rested,
Yeah. And then I think at one point that bone pops through the leg again. And this is where we get to the point where we were talking about the possible amputation.
Yeah.
But then
because Bruder just out of nowhere makes a jackass comment, like obviously if you're
joking, he's joking. Yeah.
He's joking, but kind of like not really the time to be joked like that, because
yeah,
he's on a rescue mission to rescue his wife who could either be like getting murdered or raped by, whatever. And it's just like, Jesus, dude.
Well, you get the impression that Bruder doesn't have a lot of friends. He has acquaintances,
sure,
and people don't necessarily hold him in low regard, but he doesn't have friends.
Right.
He's a guy, hey, Mr. Bruder, and he'll say, hey, how you doing? And tip his hat. And, you'll see him in the tavern, having a drink. He's not a drunk or anything like that. Like along the lines of like Sid Haig in the beginning.
Sure.
Sid Haig's a stone killer too, but there's a universal difference between him and David Arquette and Bruder. They're all three of them are just stone killers, but from completely different platforms. And they end up fucking resetting his leg with a fucking hammer. Holy shit.
Did they set his leg with a hammer?
Yeah, he pulls out that fucking hammer, Richard Jenkins, and he just holds it right over the bone and then just brings it down, and then you hear the impact, and then they shift the scene, because thank God they did. That was
I'm no orthopedic surgeon, but I know that using a hammer to set a bone is not the best method. I guarantee you I would set a bone better than Chicory did.
Probably, but I mean, it's probably some sort of war setting or something like that where you're on the field trying not to catch a musket or a cannonball in the ass, so you're just doing what you do, which is probably why so many legs ended up getting set off, because Chicory's out there trying to reset it with a fucking hammer.
Yeah, like, oh, shit, well.
This was the sentiment at the time. Frank L. Baum, the author of The Wizard of Oz, wrote newspaper editorials about exterminating natives. Yeah. Even President... Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, everyone at the time, most people at the time were racist. Yeah. And most people at that particular time believed in manifest destiny, right? So, yeah. I mean, all the people traveling westward. So, yeah, I mean, the sentiment at the time, yeah, I can see sort of fits in there, but he was very active about it. You know what I mean?
Like I really do get the impression you don't get into these people's life story.
Yeah,
they give you just enough so that you understand what their motivations are. Like Kurt Russell. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you get a sense of their character, and that's about it.
Yeah, Kurt Russell is there because it's his duty.
Yeah.
He's the sheriff, and no one else is going to try to rescue this woman if he doesn't. He tells his wife,
Yeah.
she's like, you shouldn't be doing this. You don't have, this isn't necessarily your job. And he's like, I don't want to argue with you about this, but there's no one else. Richard Jenkins does it because he's the loyal dog,
Yeah.
and where Kurt Russell goes, he's going to go. And I think also you get the sense that he wants to be useful. He doesn't want to be the guy when the emergency happens. He's too old to do something. So he still wants to be a man. In the traditional sense, he wants to be able to protect and serve and do his job. Obviously, O'Dwyer is there because it's his wife. And you're going to have to tie him to the bed, in chains to prevent him from going out to rescue his wife. And then you've got this other man who said he feels some obligation because he delivered the wife to the jailhouse and she ended up getting kidnapped. So I think he comes from an honorable place in terms of, how he might, maybe because she's a white woman or just a woman from town or something like that, but he's honest about it. He's like, I delivered her. I'm going with you, and she got kidnapped. I pulled her out of her home to bring to the jail.
I mean,
I'm going too.
I think he went just because he wanted to kill more Native Americans. It's like, oh, we're going to go rescue some lady.
Well, that too. I think but I think the other motivation holds up too. So I would say, it's a dual kind of thing. And he explained, he's like, how many did you kill? And he's like 116.
Yeah.
Not all of them were men. I think he's killed women and children.
Yep.
That kind of thing. He doesn't seem to have any problem with it whatsoever. So it's not like Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai, who's like a PTSD guy, from, having to do these obligatory retaliations. He's perfectly okay. And he's perfectly sober with it. And, he tells you just enough. He's like, I never told you the story of my mother and my sisters, this kind of thing. So he goes, that has an impact on you when you're a small kid.
Yeah.
This kind of thing. So he hates them, I guess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, but it's not it's like a calm kind of thing. It's not like a raving lunatic, kind of thing. It's very measured.
I mean, I would say he is a psychopath, probably, because he's
remorseless.
He's not a sociopath, but he has like that sort of charm that psychopaths can have to sort of manipulate people to, their will or whatever they,
Sure.
He's pretty well spoken. Obviously, he's got fancy things like the German, right? Like, so he's kind of a fancy dude.
Well, he's also a single man. He's got no wife. He's got no children. So he doesn't have to provide in the traditional sense and, divide up his money. Everything is kind of for him, that kind of thing.
But you could also like get the feeling that like he doesn't have a wife or children because he doesn't connect with human beings, in the way that most other human beings do, right?
Yeah. That kind of thing too. Because I mean, we get a little bit of that from O'Dwyer, where his wife kind of gets after him about complaining about being home. And she's like, "You're here with me. This is the most time we've spent with each other.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be miserable about it." She kind of points things out to him, and he kind of makes an adjustment. He's like, "Okay, you're right. I didn't realize," and kind of from there. Yeah, there's none of that with him. I get the impression that wouldn't work very well with him. So there you go. Now, at this point, they leave O'Dwyer, and this is where it just starts to descend. And Kurt Russell tells him, we're here for a rescue, not a massacre.
Yeah.
This kind of thing. Not that it would have worked out any differently, but I mean, he goes in first, and when shit falls apart, it happens quickly.
I thought it was like kind of funny. He says, "Give me 30 seconds, and if I don't signal you, then
just leave."
Just leave. And he pulls out his watch like immediately, and he's keeping it to exactly 30 seconds. I didn't count how much time went by, but you could tell the rock was thrown at like kind of the last.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw this because I knew it was going to happen. This is maybe the second or third time I've seen it. I own a copy on DVD. But I mean, you could tell that was a bad place that they were in. You know, that howling started up again, you know, like the night before. Kurt Russell's like, you know, check your firearms. You know, we've been spotted. You know, they know we're coming in. So
and it's a sketchy entrance too, because
it's like real narrow.
Like designed sketchy, right?
So. Yeah, and he goes in with that rifle, you know, and it's a very smart ambush. He waits till they come back and they're all together. And then all of a sudden, all those arrows start flying, and Bruder gets taken out right away.
Yeah.
He gets taken out right away. Kurt Russell gets one through the arm. I mean, they get chopped up really fast.
Chicory catches the rock to the dome.
Huh?
Chicory catches that rock to the dome, right?
Oh, yeah. It falls apart really fast. And later on, when O'Dwyer comes along, he can see, it's like, this is where it capsized.
Yeah. Like, why the fuck didn't they take the upper way around to begin with? You know what I mean? That was kind of a bad call, but
yeah. They just went straight in through the front door.
Yeah.
Which was not smart. They were down a man. And you know, they end up paying for it. Hold on a second. We got a comment here. That howling noise was bone chilling. And when you find out they're doing it themselves and not with an instrument, scary as hell. Yeah. I mean, what ends up happening is that, you know, the stakes get ramped up super fast all of a sudden. And then, like, the minute that they start to go forward, the three of them, all the sort of animosity goes out the window. I don't know if you noticed that, but like the mood changed, you know, and everybody's like sort of depending on everybody else.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter because they all get chopped up really fast. And then you find out what's actually going on in that house, in that place. And it's fucking awful.
Well, yeah, before they actually get up there, though, you know, they kill their attackers, but they're all obviously injured. Matthew Fox gets his hand cut off.
Yeah.
And so he's a goner, and so he sort of realizes he's a goner, you know, and I thought it was an interesting sort of interplay between with him and everyone else, and sort of just like his last moment, like, oh, give me a cigar, I'll take out as many, and the repeater, I'll take out as many as I can, you know?
Yeah. Well, he was, I mean, like, so I think you're right. He obviously wants to kill Indians.
Yeah.
But I think he also wanted to save Mrs. O'Dwyer.
And he also says, I'm too vain to live as a handicapped person or a disabled person. Like, so like, you know, losing a hand, that's a death sentence for me.
Yeah. There's that. You know, Kurt Russell tells him, you know, this is going to count for something.
Right.
You know, we're not going to let you die for nothing. You know, we're going to, you know, he gives him that reassurance before he goes. Because you can see he's going to die. Yeah. He's gonna bleed out right there. He's fighting, you know, trying not to go into shock. You know, he's scared. And then, you know, I think a couple seconds after they leave, another one of the troglodytes just descends on him.
Yeah.
And I think something gets thrown and he shoots at the same time.
Right.
You know, so he ends up taking out one with him.
He gets taken out by that Bone Tomahawk.
Yeah. That's a nasty weapon, man.
It's like a jawbone that they somehow sharp enough to take a human hand off with one chop, right?
Yeah. That's this is some nasty stuff you're dealing with. And then, you know, the throat pieces, you know, you see what ends up happening to that character, Ben.
Yeah.
The deputy, and that's when it just, you know, it just goes off the rails at that point. And I wasn't going to put that overlay in there because, you know, it's fucking gratuitous. I didn't really see the point, and plus for people who haven't seen it, they might, you know, if they catch it in the replay, that kind of thing. I honestly thought Russell was going to die when they were attacked outside the cave. It wouldn't have surprised me, and it wouldn't have been outside of the tone of the rest of the film if he had got taken out early.
Well, they sort of, I mean, his struggle is such that he's obviously has lost the upper hand, right? I mean, he's getting like, he could have easily died, but homeboy, you know, knocked him out instead.
Yeah. it's just you find out Mrs. Dwyer is alive. The stakes have gone up through the roof because they really are fucking cannibals.
Yeah.
What they end up doing to Nick, scalping the stake through the mouth, split down the middle.
It seemed like excessive.
Yeah. I mean, now none of this is in the book.
Yeah.
None of this is in the book. This has nothing to do with Native Americans. It has everything to do with rescuing these two girls from the brothel who have been maimed at the brothel because it's just like the brothel from hell.
Yeah. I mean, I thought like that not only did they scalp him, but then they like jam it down his throat.
Yes.
Like
they jam it down his throat and then stuff a stake, I think, through they impale him through the mouth.
Well, yeah, I got the sense they were like pushing it down, right?
Yeah, it's really something, man. And this is where, the real sort of body horror starts. They get their ass kicked. You're not used to seeing that happen to Kurt Russell.
Right.
And so you're like, oh, okay, I guess they really aren't going to make it. But then we have the argument, what I called in the notes, the Arthur O'Dwyer and the case of the Second Amendment, who just comes in with his pistol and just starts shooting people.
Yeah.
I didn't think he was going to be a part of the story anymore. I thought when they did that with his leg that he would just kind of exit from the story, but he comes back and saves everybody.
I like too that it wasn't like he was a badass. It was like you got the feeling like just the way that it was executed that like he just kind of got lucky all those times, like it could have gone either way completely easily. It wasn't like, if you see like Sylvester Stallone as Rambo, you're like, oh yeah, that dude's going to kill everyone because he's a fucking bad. This was like kind of clumsy. He's like last second getting the bullet in his gun and like,
yeah, this isn't Commando.
Right.
This guy is like crawling and shooting people, which actually seems to make him a tougher target to hit. But he just goes in there and he's killing as many of them as he can. And he is probably the last person that I thought would have come to everyone else's rescue because he's the one that's the most dinged up from the start.
Yeah.
You've got Kurt, and Kurt Russell's ass kicking just continues throughout this whole movie. And they trick the guys into drinking the opium,
right?
And then they just cut him. I mean, it's grotesque. This is not something you're used to seeing happen to Kurt Russell.
And he just leaves it in there for the rest of the movie.
I think you're right. Yeah, he just because he ends up. I think the net. What happens after that is he just takes a round right to the chest, and that just sort of takes him out of the game for the.
Yeah, it's more like he's gut shot.
Is he gut shot? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like on the other side because he knows that he's a goner, but simultaneously he's conscious enough to sit there and try to do what he can.
You've got the great Geno Sedgers as Bortusks, the leader of the troglodytes, and Geno Sedgers is a favorite of mine, and he was another alumni of that show Banshee.
Okay.
Or he was a major villain because that also had heavy themes of modern Native American issues. Because out there in Pennsylvania, Dutch country, you do have Native Americans that live out there.
Yeah.
And Geno Sedgers is like some 6'4". He's like an ex-football player. He played on like the U.S. rugby team, these sorts of things. So he's like this big giant monster. He looks like a pro wrestler.
Yeah, it's big
yeah, and he's just beating the hell out of Kurt Russell until Kurt Russell picks up that Bone Tomahawk and chops off the top part of his foot.
Yep.
And then, Kurt Russell goes full Kurt Russell and just, starts cleaning house again. And it is sad when he, you realize he's really not going to make it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there's no way, nowadays you could airlift him to a hospital and probably save his life, but
oh yeah, he was dead.
He was. I mean, you get gut shot back then, and you're fucked. Completely fucked.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But then, I just was thinking also, like, that flask had been in the fire, so it's pretty much cauterized his wound. It probably wouldn't have been a good idea to pull that out anyway. But it just,
No,
I think it's just like,
yeah, he's done.
Yeah.
He's done. And it is kind of sad. He tells the backup deputy, say goodbye to my wife. I'll say hello to yours.
Yeah.
Even at the end, there's no real, exploration of feelings of anything. Everything that's said is meaningful. And that's what I liked about this. It's got, there's nothing excessive in the dialogue. Everything has its purpose. There's nothing additional. I really disagree with people that think that this movie was too long.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't feel that at all. And, every line in there serves a purpose. And that's, kind of the way it ends. I mean,
well, Patrick Wilson removes their thing, right?
The throat whistle.
The throat whistle. But I mean, pretty crazy thing to do, because he, like, even as he's like going up, he's like, "What is that, jewelry?" And then he just basically cuts it right out of the dude's fucking throat and like tears the gristle off and like puts it in his pocket. Like,
that's disgusting. Yeah, when he puts it in his mouth, and then when he wants to kiss his wife.
Yeah, right.
And she's like, "No, you had that." And so he just like wipes his mouth, and he's like, "Is this fine?" She's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever, man. You just had that fucking gristle from someone's throat in your mouth."
Yeah.
But, okay.
Just fucking nasty all the way around.
Yeah, it's fucking grotesque. Boar tusks made me think of The Predator. Body modification. Yeah, and is it this weekend that Cronenberg's movie hits?
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure.
Sure. That's all about body horror and body modification. So, I mean, the movie just kind of ends from there. Kurt Russell doesn't make it. Bruder doesn't make it. The last person I would have thought to make it is the backup deputy, Richard Jenkins.
Yeah. Patrick
Wilson, Chicory. Arthur makes it. And Samantha O'Dwyer. I mean, she actually survives. There's no sense of sexual assault or anything like that, because they just want to eat her.
Right. Well, but they do also show, like, this was pretty brutal when they're walking out and they see the pregnant women who have had their limbs and like stakes driven in their eyes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was going to get into that. Yeah, I was going to double back to that. Jesus, that's just, and they just leave her there.
Yeah.
They just leave her there.
They're just laying there. Yeah.
And I seem to recall that I thought when I watched it the first time that they used the dynamite. I thought Kurt Russell had kept the dynamite, but I guess not.
No, because you hear,
the gunshots.
They did math throughout that whole last act on how many troglodytes there were, and apparently they believe there was 3 left, and you hear 3 gunshots like spaced apart. So you get the sense that even though Kurt Russell died, he did make it count. So like,
Yeah, because they all know where Bright Hope is.
Right.
That's the exact reason. I mean, it's not just for revenge, it's so that none of them can come back to that town ever again. Damn. What a flick. And the pregnant troglodytes as they leave. Yeah.
Brutal.
Rough movie, man. Rough movie, but a great movie.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
I'm a big fan of this movie. I thought it was 10 times better than the Hateful Eight, which was, just kind of a Western comedy, with the over-the-top Tarantino violence. It's unique. There aren't a lot of movies like this. Lots of search and rescue movies, but I've never seen one like this.
No, it was good, and you should also watch Brawl in Cell Block 99. You'll like that one as well.
Okay, who's in that? It's somebody unusual, isn't it? Vince Vaughn. Yeah, Vince Vaughn. Okay,
Brawl and Don Johnson. Don Johnson's in it.
Well, Don Johnson's always good.
Yeah.
I had this book. I don't think it made it back to the States with me when I came back. And another book that he wrote, which was really good, called The Confederation of Jackals. He writes some really hardcore stuff, and it's good stuff. So if you ever get a chance, see if you can find some of it on Amazon or Thrift Books or wherever you get your books. It's good stuff. Is there anything that we missed? Do you think was there anything we left out?
No, I think we hit most of the major points, right?
I think so. This movie right now is not streaming anywhere. You can buy it. You can buy or rent a digital copy on Amazon. Every once in a while, it'll pop up on a random streaming service.
I've definitely watched it streaming before. I think it was streaming on Prime for a while, and I think it has also been on Shudder.
It's one of those movies, though, that, again, not a lot of people know about. People who talk about Kurt Russell, they're usually talking about The Thing, or they're talking about Big Trouble in Little China or something like this. But again, this is a film that, not a lot of people know about. So if you get a chance, I give it, my highest recommendation. It's really fucking solid.
Yeah, it was a great movie. I loved it.
Yeah. Hold on. We got one more comment. Great movie, great stream. Great job. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you indeed.
So, tell people where they can find you, where they can find your content. Have you got anything coming up?
I do have stuff coming up. I've been sort of on a YouTube hiatus for a while, but I stream every Saturday with the Coast to Coast crew on H&S Collectibles channel usually. I stream on Night Watch Zone with Eric and a bunch of other people semi-regularly. I mean, we used to do it once a month, but I think it's scheduling's been tricky lately. And I've been meaning to get back into making YouTube content as well.
What's your channel's name?
Cadaver Club.
Okay. And so that's where they can find you there. And you're also on Patrick's monthly IFC Midnights.
That is also correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I basically never turn down a stream. I mean, it's basically, I live alone. So that's what's kept me going through the pandemic,
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. All right. So my thanks to you for popping in. I'd love to have you back sometime.
Sure.
I hope you had a good time. We can get together and cover some movies sometime again. And it's all good. For this channel, this is the final stream of the week. I've had 4 streams this week. So it was a fucking lot.
Yeah.
Next week, we are back on Wednesday as we continue our journey down the Monsterverse with Kong Skull Island.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so that's a fun one. And then on Thursday, we're starting our theme for the summer of crime. We're going to be looking at crime thrillers throughout the entirety of the summer from now up until the end of August. And we're starting out with we've never done a comic. Well, we've done Blade, but we've never done a more modern comic book movie until what's coming up. We're going to take on The Dark Knight,
okay,
which should be good. That's probably one of the greatest comic book movies of all time, and just an all-time classic all around. So that's us for next week, down to 2 streams. My thanks to Cadaver Club for stopping in tonight, and my thanks to Mr. Dan and Eric and everyone in the stream. And we'll see you all next week. And take care, everybody. Have a good one.